What's up guys, Jacob Couch here. Just gonna go over a very basic fundamental mount escape, but one of the most effective nonetheless. So our opponent has high knees, like they're really close to our armpits here. It's hard sometimes necessarily because you feel like they're super heavy and they're gonna be super tight in this position. Okay, so all we're gonna look to do instead of pushing, because if we start to double post on their chest and push, we're gonna give them a really good chance of getting an arm bar, maybe pushing our arm across, taking our back. Okay, so from here, all we're gonna do is we're gonna keep our elbows tight to our body, and then we're gonna look to use our feet to get our body on its side instead of our back on the mat. Okay, so here, I'm gonna look to turn my hips just at an angle, so I'm using my feet. I'm putting both my feet on one side here, and I'm looking to get on a hip. Okay, so here, from here, I'm just gonna look to bring my elbow inside of his knee. And then from here, I'm gonna use a frame across his hips. I'm gonna use my elbow to kind of open his knee enough to where I could push it down, or I could start to trap his ankle with my far leg, okay? From here, I'm just gonna look to bring his foot between my legs and start to trap it, using my elbow to open his knee. Keep it open, that way you can't keep the pinch and keep the pressure in the mount. I'm gonna look to open his knee and get his knee in between my legs and retain to a half guard. Okay, so here, we get my knee over his knee, using my elbow to open it. And then I'm gonna use my frames. I'm gonna keep my elbows tight. I'm gonna switch this hand across the hip, and then I'm gonna get my other elbow inside of his other knee to get back on my inside hip. Okay, so now I'm in a half guard position instead of being necessarily in the bottom mount. High mount. Here, our opponent is getting here. We use our feet, put both of our feet on one side, keeping our elbows tight. We get our feet on one side, enough to get us on a hip. Okay, so if I want to get on my left hip, I'm gonna put my feet both of my feet almost on the right side. If I want to get on my right hip, I would put both of my feet on the left side. So here, and then I look to get my elbow inside of his knee, here, and a frame across his hips. So all we're gonna do from here is bring our far leg to the outside of their ankle, enough to trap their foot in between our legs, okay? From here, we're not gonna overextend and push them off from here. We're not gonna use both of our hands to necessarily just push the leg down. If I overextend both hands this way, Dro can circle and take my back very easily because I have no defense and I'm just turning and exposing my back here, okay? So we keep a frame across the hip, we keep an elbow on the inside of the knee, that way when we get on our side, even if our back is a little exposed, if Dro tries to take my back now, I just open my elbow and keep it on the inside of the hip enough to where I could retain the half guard. Here, elbow in, feet first, then we're gonna look to get our elbow inside. 1, 2, 3, and then from here, we're gonna use our frame across the hip and our elbow on the inside of the knee to open, get enough of an angle to where we can trap the foot with our far leg and bring it in between ours. From here, we're just gonna look to get the knee down, or use the elbow to get the knee down in between our legs here, and look to use the frame across the hip that we're gonna switch to get back on the inside hip. So here, boom. If they're really high and you can't necessarily get your elbows inside yet, all we're gonna look to do is keep a frame on their hips enough to where we could shimmy our shoulders away. Okay, so you don't wanna think about necessarily pushing them up if they're really heavy and they're really high in the mount. Come on, bro. Here, because pushing him is not gonna create a lot of space, because when you push him up, he's just gonna come straight back down. So if they're really high and you're having a harder time getting your elbows inside, we're just gonna look to use our frame on the hips to shimmy our shoulders away enough to where we could get our elbow inside. From here, We put both our feet on one side enough to create an angle. That way we can turn our body on its side, keeping a frame on the hip, not overexposing our back, enough to where you could trap the leg in the middle and look to retain that here. Keeping the entire time you guys are doing this move or practicing this, you want to practice keeping your hands in as well as your elbows, because anytime that you're overextending in this position, not only can you get submitted or armbarred or your back took, but you can give up underhooks, which will set up all of those things, okay? So if we can eliminate the possibility of them setting it up, we can eliminate the possibility of it, okay? Elbows in the entire time. I get my elbow inside, I have a frame across the hips. I look to trap the foot in between my legs enough to use it. Another thing you guys can do is when you go to retain, is you bring the foot towards the middle with your legs as you're using your elbow to open. So you're not just opening the elbow, but you're swinging enough to where you can get your frames inside.